Yes, my name is Michelle Ngele. Let's begin with our top story this morning, where the opposition coalition NASA has issued a raft of new demands to the electoral body IEBC ahead of the August polls. NASA now wants an immediate release of the recent voter register audit conducted by KPMG. The coalition is also calling on the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission to immediately conduct a mock voter transmission to demonstrate to the country how the system will work in August. NASA further claims that the IEBC had withdrawn the shortcode that it released 2 days ago over suspicious flaws. But as Duncan Haemba now reports, the IEBC says NASA's demands are unfounded.
With exactly 5 weeks before the eagerly awaited Tuesday, August 8th general election, and the National Super Alliance says it is not taking anything to chance.
Yes.
In a news conference convened by NASA presidential candidate communication advisor Salim Lon, the opposition is calling upon IEBC to explain why it withdrew the SMS service for voter verification it had issued through code 70000 just yesterday.
For example, the numbers 0, 003, 006 all returned particulars of alleged voters who do not even exist. Even more strange, searching using some ID numbers of dead relatives of NASA Secretariat staff, those who have recently, in the last 2-3 years, perished, showed that some of these numbers now, their numbers, had been assigned to other voters.
NASA claims names of voters who died as early as 2013 were discovered to be still on the register, while other voters had registered using ID numbers that don't exist in the National Database of Registration of Persons.
The Commission has been working for months to clean this register, and in fact, overall, the Commission has been working for years to put out this new information. And yet, within 2 days of releasing the register, it withdrew the SMS service with the short code 7000.
Why can't they just be explaining the anomalies? How come that every time once citizens of this country test their own system that they have voluntary and on their own volition provided, and it comes up with problems, they always pull it down? What are they hiding?
However, IEBC Chief Executive Officer Ezra Chiloba has clarified to KTN News that the verification code is still up and running. The opposition says it has received information that IEBC is planning to split the voter register into 13 geographical regions because the electronic voter identification EVID kits it has acquired have no capacity to carry the entire register of 19.6 million voters.
So they're now dividing the system into 13 regions, some of which actually overlap jurisdictions. It's not understandable. There should be each county having its register deposit and all the IVID kits to be used in that region, so that when people go to vote, you're not worried whether this is from this county and yet you have to look at the names in other counties. Doesn't seem right. There has to be some reason for it, which has not been explained.
Chiloba says Section 4 of the Election Act is clear and that certified registers that exist are those of county voters register, constituency polling station and diaspora voters register. NASA is also demanding the following: that IEBC releases the KPMG report immediately, that the Commission should use the Integrated Population Registration Service, the IPRS database, and make its findings public, possibly by July 8th. Demand number 3 is that IEBC should state clearly what complementary measures it will be using, and that NASA will not accept the use of green books, the black books, and the special register And finally, that the secretly reinstated ICT Director James Muhati, who had been suspended last month for allegedly interfering in the audit of the register, remains under suspension. And if cleared, the commission should state clearly by who. However, Chiloba says those are purely administrative matters, and after serving his month-long suspension, Muhati is back in office.
NASA therefore demands that a dry run of the electronic voter ID system, EVID, be conducted as soon as possible.
IBC says it has already conducted its initial dry run test on the kits, and that the second try will be done in July, and the final one will be done in August before the polls. Duncan Hemba, KTN News.
Now, elsewhere, it emerged the country will have to wait for one more week to know the fate of the ballot printing case filed by NASA. The High Court says it will rule next Friday on whether the tender should be cancelled. The IBC and the government have both warned of what they see as a looming constitutional crisis if the tender is annulled. Timothy Otieno with more.
Weeks of verbal onslaught by the National Super Alliance towards the country's electoral body came to a climax Friday morning when lawyers from both sides of the dispute descended on the High Court for a case that would have huge implications for the August polls.
Has been created.
NASA lawyers stuck to their guns, insisting that the award of a ballot printing tender to Dubai-based firm Al Ghurair was done illegally owing to alleged links between high-ranking officials from the firm and senior State House members. NASA, through lawyer Jackson Awele, recommended a local printing firm be awarded the tender, a submission that Jubilee lawyer Fred Ngatia opposed.
If we are to accede to that, needless to say, my lords, there will be a logistical problem, because from the local printer doing presidential ballot, it would have to be married with the 5 other elections and this material taken to the 41,000 polling stations at the same time.
So it cannot be said that because of time, which has been there for the last 5 years, that suddenly it has dawned on the respondent that because of these timelines, we must have an election anyway on the 8th, however flawed it is going to be, without being seen to be taking measures to make sure that we have a free and fair elections.
And with just 38 days to the elections, the issue of time played out at the courts. Attorney General Githu Muigai warns that if NASA was to have its way by having the tender cancelled now, a constitutional crisis was looming.
After the 8th of August, if we do not have the election, Article 134 kicks in. Now, my lords, Article 134 means that government is completely hamstrung. It's completely hamstrung. In fact, the only organ that will be functioning will be, my lords, with respect, the judiciary.
The tender was awarded on the 8th of June after the Independent Electoral and Boundaries Commission announced to the presidential candidates its intention to single source back in May this year.
Why is it that they waited for 1 full month before coming to court? If they were seriously aggrieved by the decision, they ought to have come much earlier.
The 3-judge bench is set to make a ruling on the matter next Friday in a case likely to end the final showdown meant to quell the growing animosity between the IEBC and the opposition over the management of the August 8th polls. So next week's ruling could alter the date in which Kenyans go to the polls if the 3-judge bench decides to rule in favor of NASA. The gravity of that directive manifesting itself here today with 7 hours of submissions from all parties involved. with each side exuding confidence that come July the 7th, the court will rule in their favor. Timothy Otieno, KTN News.
Out to the campaign trail now, and Jubilee stepped up its pressure on NASA of alleged links to corruption cartels. Deputy President William Ruto revived the debate as he and President Uhuru Kenyatta took the Jubilee campaigns to Kitui. Our senior political affairs reporter Chris Tairu is traveling with the Uhuru campaigns and now explains the stakes in this crucial county.
With 1.5 million registered voters in Ukambani region, President Uhuru Kenyatta kicked off his 3-day vote hunting mission in a region perceived to be an opposition stronghold. While addressing locals in Mutomo and Mwingi areas, the deputy president continued pushing the narrative that the opposition is being funded by corruption cartels.
Now that they have accepted that their campaign is financed by corrupt cartels, the people of Kenya want to know what is the agreement with these corrupt cartels so that they can finance the NASA campaign.
Hii watu wakitendawili hakuna pahali wanaenda. Na mtaona tu. Majaliwa ya Mwenyezi Mungu, lakini mtaona tu.
NASA principal Kalonzo Musyoka has already challenged businessman Jimmy Wanjigi to expose the relationship they had with the deputy president.
Corrupt cartels who now they want to sanitize as prominent business people. I want to tell them even conmen and corrupt cartels pose as prominent business people.
Given that the region is the political backyard of NASA running mate Kalonzo Musyoka, in a tactical move, the president and his deputy steered clear of verbally attacking him.
Wakatupeleka makoti huko kwa wazungu. Si kweli? Kweli ama sio kweli? Si ukweli? Tuliwalima hatukuwalima jameni. Tukiwa huko msituni. Sasa unafikiri ni sasa tuko ndani ya serikali watatuweza?
Hata Kalonzo mwenyewe amekubali. Mulisikia alisema juzi yeye hana shida na Uhuru Kenyatta. Ile mtu wako na shida kidogo naye ni mimi. Sasa mimi namuuliza ndugu yangu, kwa sababu amekubali Uhuru Kenyatta ni mtu mzuri, mbona asikubali tumpitishe Uhuru Kenyatta tarehe 8 mwezi wa 8? Alafu ile maneno kidogo iko kati yangu mimi na yeye tunaweza kurekebisha, alafu tushindane 2022.
Out of the 8 constituencies in Kitui County, 4 sitting MPs decamped from Wiper to Jubilee Party and will be defending their seats on that ticket.
Tulikupigia kura 1400 peke yake. Saa hii, Your Excellency, angalia kikapu ya Kitui South. Tutakuwa tumejaza kura ndani.
Sisi kama Wakamba tumerefuka na sasa tunataka na tushaanza kunegotiate. Tunajua kuna nafasi za Wakamba, tena najua mumetoekea. Ila hawezi shinda Uhuru Kenyatta. Kwa hivyo mimi natuma salamu kwa ndugu yangu Kalonzo. Tunajua anaenda kuanguka, lakini sisi tumempangia kazi, tutampa kazi.
The president also took the opportunity to launch the upgrading of the Kitui-Kibwezi Road. The Jubilee leaders are determined to continue campaigning in Ukambani region, at least to get those important votes, despite the region being perceived to be a NASA stronghold. Tomorrow, the same team heads to Machakos County. Chris Tairu, KTN News in Kitui County.
Well, the National Super Alliance presidential candidate Raila Odinga yesterday took his campaigns to Migori in a move widely viewed as strategy to consolidate his votes in his backyard. And as our political affairs reporter Murimi Mwangi now tells us, Raila spent a substantive amount of the day in Kuria, a region viewed to be leaning to Jubilee.
With over 300,000 votes up for grabs, Migori was the destination of the National Super Alliance, with day-long campaigns in Rongo and Kuria, culminating in a rally at Migori town.
Kenya wanasema punda, 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 tarehe 8 mwezi wa 8. Hii mzigo itashukishwa chini. Sawa? Raundi hii
kama Raila Amolo Odinga hapati hiyo kura, basi sisi tunajua shetani anaishi hapa.
Tarehe 8 tunajua Raila na Kalonzo wakionana na Uhuru mundu kumundu. Mundu kumundu. Utaona Uhuru miguu juu, Ruto miguu juu, Raila State House anaingia.
The NASA Supremos promising to better lives of residents here through the promised increased revenue allocation to county governments, a percentage which NASA puts at 45% in its manifesto.
Pesa ambayo wanaharibu kila siku, ile ambayo Ruto anatembea nayo kwa magunia, kwa harambee hapa, harambee hapa, harambee hapa, hapana. Tumesema hiyo pesa tutatumia kwa elimu ya watoto wetu.
Niliweka tamaa yangu chini. Nimeweka tamaa chini. Weta ameweka tamaa chini. Isaac Ruto ameweka tamaa chini. Kalonzo ameweka tamaa chini. Sisi wote tunaunga Raila Amolo Odinga.
Na wengine wanasema tu Jakoma amepita tayari. Jakom Kende. Lakini hatoki kupiga kura. Wewe usipofanya hivyo wewe utakuwa mtu unasaidia Jubilee.
In 2013, voter turnout in Migori stood at over 90%, with Raila Odinga garnering 82% compared to President Uhuru Kenyatta's 10%. A majority of Kenyatta's votes in the county coming from the Kuria region.
Jubilee wameshindwa kabisa. Wangapi wanakubaliana mimi ya kwamba Jubilee wameshindwa na lazima waende nyumbani?
Tutaenda ngambo hii kwa Magufuli. Lazima ile kipagio na kupagana ile ofisadi yote.
In Migori, ODM is facing stiff competition from independent candidates and other NASA-affiliated parties. A state of affairs that was depicted in Migori town today after supporters of gubernatorial candidate Ochilo Ayako and Governor Okoth Obado clashed shortly after the function. After the call to the over 300,000 residents here to vote for the opposition, the NASA Supremos now proceed to Bomet in the hunt for the 2017 presidential vote. Muremi Mwangi, KTN News, Migori County.
Had some good news for the doctors. Earlier yesterday, the Kenya Medical Practitioners and Dentists Board signed a CBA with the Ministry of Health, ending the back and forth that followed the Medics' 100-day strike. The doctors say that the government has granted them the allowances that they were seeking when they proceeded on strike and are hopeful that the country government will also put pen to paper the CBA that will see the doctors achieve a pay rise alongside other benefits.
Of action, you've been sent. Check for me all this. You know, Daisy, you're the one who should have been checking for me, and then I signed.
No, I'm checking if you have signed.
I'm registered.
Even my mother, she's 74.
So,
chief.
Then the chiefs will get all of them.
Because they know the village.
But this is for NHIF.
Both NHIF and social, what do we call it? That social protection thing.
Okay.
So to add that.
Now, senators and other leaders are mourning the death of veteran politician and Laikipia's Senator Gigi Kariuki, who passed on last night. The legislator, who has been ailing for a while, passed on at the Nairobi hospital. He was 79 years old.
At 78 years, Laikipia Senator Godfrey Gitahi Kariuki, popularly known as Gigi Kariuki, was the oldest senator in the country's history and the only parliamentarian to have served both in the first Senate after Kenya attained her independence and the current first Senate after promulgation of the current constitution.
The only thing which can make you survive in politics is to be a truthful person, mtu wa kweli. Usindanganywe ni mtu anakuambia siasa ni uongo. I've been in politics for all my years of my life. Miaka 50 na zaidi. Hapana mingi. Kweli hata kama ningekuwa shule ningesoma mara ngapi?
According to family sources who have spoken to the Standard newspaper, the veteran politician was admitted at the Nairobi hospital last week and passed on shortly after 11 p.m. on Thursday in the presence of family members. Kariuki served as a minister in both President Jomo Kenyatta and Daniel Arap Moi governments. Gigi Kariuki will be remembered for the role he played in the settlement of the landless people in Laikipia, which was previously part of the White Highlands.
Wewe zungumza the truth, mali ya watu kula ile wamepewa. Hapana tafuta ingine utajirike kwa sababu utatajirika uende wapi. Kila wiki mnasika. Kila wiki mnasika mtajiri. Na sijasikia mkiandikwa kwa gazeti alienda na mali yote mbinguni. Anaambia mlikuja ushi, mtarudi ushi.
The 78-year-old taekwondo black belt holder is the fourth senator to die in office after Mutula Kilonzo Senior of Makueni, Gerald Otieno Kajwang of Homa Bay, and Kwale's Boy Juma Boy.
Sehemu yetu ya maisha sio inka mbili ama tatu ama nne, ni 10, 15, 20, 100. Kwa hivyo hata sungura anaweza kutisha wewe. Kwa hivyo lazima ubebe rungu.
He has taken a final bow at a time he was seeking to defend his seat as Laikipia senator.
His contributions from the floor were always, very, very well considered, very well articulated, and you could see in him. And Gigi Kariuki is a man who had no excitement in what he did.
He was a silent walker, a listener, and somebody who would meditate a lot before he would answer your question.
Ni mtu ambao kwa hakika alikuwa mpole katika hii miaka 5, na ni mtu alikuwa mtu wisdom, so akisimama ni mtu ajaribu kutuliza senators wakibishana kuhusu jambo fulani na nini, ni mtu ya kujaribu kumtuliza watu na kumjaribu kumpatia hikma zake ambazo alikuwa nazo katika ile miaka zote ambazo alikuwa katika siasa.
Yeye alikuwa kama yule mtu ambaye mimi huenda kwa yeye wakati niko na shida fulani za kisiasa. Na kutoka siku hizo za 2002 tangu sasa alipoaga dunia, mimi nilikuwa namchukua kama mzee ambaye anajua mengi.
Duncan Hemba, KTN News.
Let's now talk about something that everybody wants to hear about, but that's if you love ugali. Earlier yesterday, 3 million bags of maize arrived at the port of Mombasa, destined for various milling companies around the country. And as our coast reporter Francis Mtalaki now explains, the government says the cry for unga might soon be over.
Over the last 2 months, a biting shortage of unga has persisted. This despite government assurance that they had procured enough maize to put unga back on the shelves for Kenyans. A measure of relief may now be felt in the coming few days after the latest consignment of 3,090,000 kg bag of maize arrived in Mombasa. According to the Agriculture Ministry, this is enough to feed the nation, at least for the month of July.
Nobody should panic anymore. Nobody should, if there are still incidences of shortages, it is just a matter of time, a very short time indeed, when all these maize start arriving in full into the millers.
According to the government, they have put in place measures to rein on the cartels that they say they are partly to blame for the shortage.
The millers are upping their capacity operation now from 60% to 100%.
The ministry says that the new consignment is destined for small-scale traders and shops in rural areas so as to set demand outside urban centers where earlier efforts had been focused.
We are not fixing the number of bosho mills. We will only deal with those who meet our criteria and those whom have been vetted by the provincial administration.
The cabinet secretary noted that there are other vessels that are on the way to the port of Mombasa.
In every mill, there is a government official inside every mill who benefits from our distribution to ensure that there's no monkey business which is going on there. So we have deployed our officers in all the mills.
As the 3 million bags are being packed here at the grain bag, the government now maintains that these 3 million bags are enough to feed this country, at least for the month of July. Francis Mtalaki, KTN News, Mombasa.
It's now 23 minutes past the hour. You're watching a Weekend Express and KTN News. Stay with us. We take a short break. We'll be back with more.